We were on the road, and Tony, I hired Tony Garnier when he was 18 and played in the band, and then he left in the late 80s. We were just good friends. So anyway, he was with Dylan for 30 years, and so, hey, come to the concert. We were in the same city, and so I met him. It was when Steve Earle was playing, opening for him, 80-something. My first conversation with Bob, hey, so nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And then, so where you living, Bob? East, west? Yeah. But over the years, we toured with him once. We did a month tour with him. I would go see him occasionally. Occasionally he would, so Tony would say, hey, Bob wants to talk to you. All the guys in the band says, look, Bob never talked to any of us. I don't know why he's talking to you. But we got along, and he's obviously a very smart, interesting guy, to say the least. But my favorite Bob is me and Jason. We were touring with him. We're in Rochester, Minnesota. He comes up and goes, hey, I played here. And this is old building. I said, really? When? He said, yeah, in 1959, I was playing piano for Bobby V, which he did. And Bobby V was from Hibbing, Minnesota. So we finished the set, and he comes up and he goes, hey, guys, what is a train here with? Oh, man, Bob Dylan has asked me what a train here is with. What, Bob? He said, engineers. And he was right. Yeah, no, whatever Bob does, you don't expect, period. That's Dylan. He doesn't want you to, want any pursuit, he wants to define the moment. It's great.
Did you get to play music with him at all?
A couple times, yeah.
Did he get you up at the shows? Or?
Yeah, not anymore. He don't do that anymore. Well, he does, although the other day he was in Austin, I was busy, but Jimmy Vaughn, who's my good friend, he called up and said, hey, I want you to come jam. Jimmy was like, okay, and he went up. He was, I wasn't there, but I guess it went fine. Bob's, he's such an interesting character. It's amazing that he's alive. He's 82 or 3 or something, and still out there just killing it.
Have you met Keith?
No, I've tried. In fact, I hit up Steve Jordan the other day, the drummer who plays for the Stones. Hey, when they came to Austin many years ago, and there's a clip of it that did Bob Wills Is Still the King. There's a clip of that. And I'm like, hey, over here. I don't know. I love the Stones. Just love them. I did meet Bill Wyman, but we did a little show with him in Germany. No, they were one of my favorite bands, and Keith, just brilliant. Well, they're the greatest rock and roll band ever, and that's quite a and because they're just they've stayed true to the elements of rock and roll. They are still funky, but they are still polished. They're both, and that's quite a. And Jagger, come on, 80 years old, whatever. Why do you look like you're free? I was discussing Robert Johnson the other day, making a deal with the devil. And I found out that the most brilliant thing, I don't mean to jump tracks, but essentially the same thing, I'm going to bring it back to Mick, is they said, when he went down to the crossroads and met with the devil, what did he get? Well, I realized what he got was open tuning. Because standard tuning, you couldn't do what he did. I love Robert Johnson. I just stayed at the Menger Hotel the other night. That's where he recorded in San Antonio. I stayed there. I got to go to the right room.
I stayed in that room about 6 years ago, and it cost me like $300. Yep. It's the most I've ever spent on a hotel room.
Yeah, it's I had a quite expensive breakfast there. Yeah.
Is it room 311?
I guess I didn't stay in that room, so I'm going to have to go back and spend another $300. But I was, because they redid the Alamo, and I'm one of the voices of you take a tour of the Alamo, and they have one of them things, and so I'm one of the voices there, and I was doing a thing for them, which I'm very proud of. Yeah, well, I was involved with one publicist when they got the money when they got the guy Steve. The lawyer who had stolen the name, his name was Steve. He had the only picture, and he had gotten a signature of some niece, and he'd been collecting the royalties and everything for years. Levere, his name was, and finally, everybody had been trying, and they finally found his one of his would have been a son. He was a dump truck driver in L.A. I can't remember his name, and they went to trial, and the greatest thing was, so they had a woman, and she was in her 80s and something, she said, and she verified that she saw Robert Johnson and her friend, the woman, go into a grove of trees and have sex. And the judge says, well, what were you doing? He says, well, I was having sex right on the other thing. And the judge was like, you were what? He said, you ought to try it sometime, Judge. And the dates that she remembered were exactly right. For 9 months later, he was born, and so this guy got it from this shyster lawyer who had been collecting all of it over these years, and now there's another fight. I mean, cousins come out of the woodwork, I'm sure. But well, we were booked to play with him by Al Aronowitz was the guy's name. He was a promoter in New York City at the Felt Forum, which is Madison Square Gardens, but the smaller venue was, and it was us and Merle Haggard, 1976, I think. And I'm thrilled. He's got the greatest band. Johnny, I knew all the guys who really were, the Eldon Shamblin, the old Bob Wills guys. They said, hey, you want to smoke a joint, Merle? I said, yeah. So we had a van. We went in the back and smoked a joint. And we were all supposed to do a sound check, and we went out and just jammed. And it was just heaven on earth, man. Because it was Tiny Moore, I can't remember, Eldon Shamblin, the legend, Merle, Ronnie Reno, and Leona, and the Great Stranger band, Roy Nichols, etc. And we just jammed. We were all stoned out of our gourds, jammed, and it was just phenomenal. And we became good friends. Merle was a very good friend of mine. He was an intelligent iconoclast and just amazing.
What are some things that people might not know about Merle?
A whole lot of things. He lived life to the fullest. He was difficult at times, but certainly the most creative human being I ever met. He was obviously a great songwriter, obviously a great singer, but he was also a fiddler. I mean, he took the time to learn how to fiddle. Now, I mean, he wasn't virtuoso, but he played fiddle. He played guitar. When we did the Last of the Breed tour, this was when we backed up Merle, Willie, and Ray Price. He was just amazing, He always liked to challenge you, too, so he'd play a lot of guitar solos, and I'd just be sitting there going, I don't care, go right ahead, Hag, play all you want. But for a guy who was the voice of not a generation, a voice of something, and I mean, such a voice of the working people, the common man, whatever you want to talk about, he certainly was. Let me put it this way. When Merle Haggard had Okie from Muskogee and Fighting Sodomy, #1 records, huge, made him the superstar he is. The next thing he did, a tribute to Bob Wills record, a tribute to Jimmy Rogers record, a tribute to the New Orleans sound. I mean, what a dedication to the history of country music. I mean, without Merle Haggard doing that Bob Wills album, I don't reckon me and George Strait would be as knowledgeable of Wills music as I know we wouldn't have been. And now, Sleep at the Wheel, we collected the 78s, I still do. But George, would have been, without having that, would have probably just been another mainstream country artist. Instead, he is one who has, really brought the traditional country music, especially Western swing, at least to the forefront.
In your book, you told a story about seeing his tour bus over at the Shoney's by Music Row. People might not remember, but that's where a lot of the tour buses would gather and people would go there to get on the bus to go on tour. Could you tell that story?
Yeah, he pulls in. I go, hey, what's up? He said, come on, we're going over to CBS Records and kick some ass. Now, he didn't know I had just re-signed with CBS Records with Rick Blackburn. And Larry Hamby went, "Oh, okay, come on." We go over there. I don't realize, whatever, Hag, let's go. We go over there, and it's Rick Blackburn, Larry Hamby. He was head of A&R, and Rick Blackburn was head of the label. Rick was the one who dropped Johnny Cash. What else did he turned Columbia B, that legendary, recording studio, into the art department, So anyway, they're sitting there and they're arguing, and all of a sudden, and Hag goes, "How come you're not giving me the money I asked for you?" He said, "Well, because Pancho and Lefty had been a big hit that Willie and Merle hit, and he had turned in Kern River, the great record he did about Bakersfield, and it didn't sell as well." And Blackburn says, "Well, your last record didn't sell." He said, and Hag goes, "It didn't sell because you didn't promote it." Blackburn goes, "We didn't promote it because it sucked." I'm sitting here going, holy mackerel, what's going to happen now? Hag stands up and goes, "Who the fuck are you to, he goes on. And then he stands up and he says, and Blackburn had spina bifida. And Hag goes, "I'll kick your crippled ass with one arm tied behind my back." Me and Larry Hammond had our looking at each other going, "Are they going to start wrestling around on the floor? Are we going to have to break them up? Oh my God." And then the tension, And that was one of the great moments in country music. And I'm proud to have been there. He never got he was asking for $500,000 and they weren't giving it to him.
To say there's no good songs on that Kern River record,
yeah. Hag was absolutely right. It was funny. He gave me my comeback because we had been out of it. In '86, I'm doing these demos on this 8-track analog studio that me and a friend had, and all of a sudden I get a record deal back, and I'm going, all right, But that was a time. CBS Records had cratered '84 and '85. And so Blackburn's going, what can I do? Willie had left because he wouldn't deal with Blackburn. He said, "Screw you, I'm going to New York." And he was big enough to the thing. But then again, that was the year, '86. Katie Lang, Lyle Lovett, Steve Earle that's when he put out Guitar Town. The O'Kanes, Dwight Yoakam, yeah. And this was the resurgence of country music. This was the savior of country music those few years. And then Garth came. And we all, Garth opened for us a lot. And then we opened for him and it's a shame because Garth's first album was great country music. Too old to feel this, too young to feel this old, damn old, whatever. But again, that was the ramp, I call it, that transitioned, old country with new country, and then. No, we were amazed. We started having, not big hit records, but top 20 and 30, on the charts. And then I found out how corrupt the charting thing was. We had Boogie. We had Boogie Back to Texas, and it was climbing the charts and everything. And they had those things where you had to keep your bullet, And there was this band called the Shooters. Who the hell are they? And we thought we had everything, and the head of whatever promotion had sacrificed our record so that the Shooters could move up, whoever the hell they were, and that's how that worked. And so we couldn't, and then they dropped us, even though we were profitable. It was funny, CBS, we had recouped our advance, we were they dropped us, mostly, which was fine because then we went to another label. But yeah, it was definitely a moment in time when country music was changed forever, and Steve Earle brought the twang back to country music for sure, and that record to me is one of the most important records ever made. And people think about the O'Kanes. What a fabulous band that was! You remember the O'Kanes, Jamie? That record was incredible. Roseanne Cash and etc. Rodney Crowell. Think of the Nancy Griffith, yeah. Floyd Domino was my piano player for many years, and then he went to New York, and did the Best Little Whorehouse, and then he went with Waylon for 5 years, and then he came back to Austin, and Hag was doing something over at the Riverbend Center, and he said, "Hey, I need a piano player. You think Floyd would do it?" I said, "Oh, absolutely. Man, you just need to ask him." So he did, and I filmed him and got a great story. He told about Bob Wills. I was I can't remember why I was doing it, but anyway, glad I did. And that was it. And, that was the last time I saw him, but I always kept in touch. Oh no, oh yeah, he came through Nashville. They had a tattoo biker kind of big festival that bombed. The guy ran out of money, and it was us and Hag. That was right, and it was here. It was horrible, but we played, and I sat on a bus with him and Teresa, and had a wonderful talk. We always did, because as different as we were, our lives were so intertwined. It was really, really interesting.
Did you ever get to play Lefty's guitar?
Yep, on his bus. Yeah.
What's your memories of that?
Just wow, whoa! Yeah, he said, "Yeah, I bought it at $150,000." Yeah, it was just because the whole Lefty thing. I was supposed to go see him when we were out in California. He played at Cowtown. Leroy went, and somebody else. I couldn't go for some reason. Leroy came back. It says B-72 probably, and I said, "How was he?" He said, "Oh, he was drunk." He said it was kind of depressing. I said, "I'm glad I didn't go." But the whole thing about Lefty, it's funny. Gimbel told me the story. So like 1951 is or 52, I think is when I was born in 51, but I guess that's when it is. And he recorded it all in Dallas at that famous studio. Jim, I can't remember his name, but he did all Lefty and a bunch of other records, and then died. Suddenly, they all said that Dallas could have been Nashville, but I said not really, because it was the Opry that brought had a promotion. We didn't have a radio station, although maybe we did. Anyway, so Gimbel told me a story about Lefty's having all these hits, Always Late, etc. I'm not sure what year was it, but it was early 50s. It must have been, because Gimbel was still with Wills, and they said, "Bob," they were at a cafe. He said, it was a jukebox. He said, "Bob, there's a record of that guy. They've all been requesting the song that you don't know." He said, "Well, play it for me." Play it. Now, this time, it's 1950-something. Bob always thought of himself as a big band leader. You have as many pieces as you can. 2 fiddles, a horn, piano, bass, drums. As much as you can afford, you got. And he plays the record, and it's it's guitar, steel, bass. That's about it. Maybe drums. I don't know. And he plays for him. Bob goes, "They want that?" And Gimbel told me something that is so true and so important. He says, "Ray, generations start out liking stuff that's really raw, and then it goes along, and at the end of 10 years, it gets really polished, and they don't like that, and then the younger generation comes up and likes the raw stuff." I said, "Absolutely, Johnny. Look, you can see it. It's happening today." And it was quite a lesson. But Bob didn't quite understand. They want that. That's a hillbilly singer singing, And that was the thing, is that he had gotten very slick and wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the last Western swing stuff was really the Sacramento band in the early 50s. But it was swing music. It wasn't raw enough.
Yeah. That's quite the observation. I think that's really true.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look at the Rolling Stones. Look at the kids today. Look at punk music. First met Townes in 1967 at the Second Fret in Philadelphia. It was a folk club. I was 16 years old and went down to see Woody's Truck Stop, which was a band that originally Todd Rundgren had been in, but it was a wonderful Philadelphia country rock band before there was country rock. Anyway, and Towns was opening, and I was one of them kids who hung out in the back rooms and weaseled my way wherever I could. Met Towns. He was a fresh-faced, he was not strung out by then. And then over the years, I played guitar for him at the Jerry Jeff birthday party one time, and I did cut If I Needed You on a tribute record to him. But yes, we were friends. The problem was, as much an abuser as I was one that always got up the next day, and as opposed to Blaze and Towns, I just couldn't get into the heroin and heavy alcoholism. I'd have a drink and I'd do some blow maybe, but I was always a pothead and kind of got in the way of your pot high. But I was glad because they were really on self-destructive paths that obviously that's what happened.
What did the people in the community at that moment think of Towns and his talents or whatever? Was it recognized?
Oh yeah, he was revered. Blaze, unfortunately, no, because he was so cantankerous, obviously, and at times, I guess. But the songs were just brilliant, But Towns was accepted because he was not violent and he was not big, and he was not ornery. Blaze just looked at him. He was going, hey, "What did I do?" Towns was sweet. Even he just wanted, Guy Clark was a good friend. Guy. See, a lot of things. What a lot of people don't realize about that whole thing was, writing songs. If you're Harlan Howard, who was a great friend of mine, Harlan would get up, go to work at 9 o'clock and write from 9 till 1 or 2, and then go out drinking and get ideas. Because, I remember his wife said, "Why don't you go hang out with the publishers and everything?" He says, "Listen, I need a down and out waitress at the bar is going to tell me a better story than a fucking corporate lawyer," And that was one thing. But Towns, Guy, Blaze, especially Towns and Guy, and I knew this from personal, they needed stimulants, and to sit there and write songs, the inspiration is so fickle that Go Fast Drugs and all this thing really help. Look at Roger Miller. I mean, who was the original Pillhead, Johnny Cash, Roger Miller, etc. Those kind of things, thoughts come fast and furious, And I still remember, a guy saying one time, "I got to go get something, man. I need to write songs. I need to write songs. I need to go get something." And that's a dedication to the craft, But it's a dead end street at some point,
It's a hard way to live.
Yeah. And I tried, and then by the time I was 31, and I'd seen so many of my friends, go down that path, I said, "All right, I'm done." I had a kid, and a life and a band, and I said, it was still ridiculous. It's still back then, pot was just as bad. You had to worry about getting busted, but health-wise, it was no problem. The coke was bad, the speed was bad. So,
There's a picture of Guy and Susanna on a porch with Towns, and Towns is playing a fiddle.
Famous picture.
That was taken at Guy's house just right over here, and they tore it down. One of the many things torn down in Nashville about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to think of their East Nashville roots.
I've been writing a song I'll never finish it called "This Ain't the Same Old Town. They're tearing all the buildings down and selling them by the pound. This ain't the same old town." I might just leave it at that because it's too sad. The same thing with Austin. The other day was funny. Stevie Vaughan was a friend of mine, and one of the houses that he lived in, that I know he lived in because I had visited him in it at one point to kick his ass because he was doing speed. And I said, "Dude, come on." "Oh, okay." So they got on coke. But anyway, they were selling the house to be moved. And my girlfriend actually has a whiskey company, and we were hoping that her boss and I would buy it to move it to the distillery. It's like, "This is Stevie Ray Vaughan's house, man." Although he had been, he just rented houses. He didn't have the money. but yeah, that whole thing is so much of my recording studio that I sold the building, and I built a new studio. But the building that was there for 27 years, I had Haggard had been there, Garth had been there, Willie had been there, and I tried, it was worth so much money, just the property, that I sold it because the pandemic it was a good thing because it helped me through the pandemic. But, they would have tore it down to build a condo. Luckily, I sold it to somebody who just let somebody put another studio, not a good one, but it's okay. It's a recording studio, and all these people had been there, And I said, there should be a fucking plaque on this wall, and nobody cares, Yeah, I made our first record we recorded at Mercury Studios, which is, I think now Sound something.
I was in there like 3 months ago.
Yeah. It's across from CBS over on that side street.
Ronnie Millsap's old place.
Correct, yeah. That was my first, it was Mercury Studios. Tom Sparkman was the engineer. He was the Opry engineer live. Back in the Opry, there weren't no amps. He plugged into the wall, and the guy mixed you on the thing. But anyway, yeah, it was 8-track. Our first record was 8-track, and analog. And also, we were just in Nashville was so funky. I mean, Music Row, 16th and 17th, there were all these buildings with mom and pop businesses. My favorite was Troy Hess. He was this kid, and his dad, Benny Hess, he had put out the Ballad of George Wallace and and he had a house with because it was in 1971 when I hit Nashville. So I actually came in 70, went to the Opry, but knocking on doors in 71. The biggest country sales were 25,000 albums. Johnny Cash was the first to sell 500,000 records, and that was because of TV, not because of country radio. And by 73 or 4, they had dropped him from CBS, So it was so different, and it was all the session players. You know what session scale was here in 1971? 3-hour session, $30. And they would do 3 a day. They were making $90 a day, and they were rich, as far as I was concerned. Tommy also was producing our first record, and Tommy had been, with Buddy Holly, he played Buddy, but he also worked with Bob Wills and Billy Gray, Western Swings. Anyway, and I said, where are you going now? He said, I got a session. He said, who's it for? He said, I don't know, text nobody. They call them text nobody sessions. And the guys would come in 3 hours, they'd cut 2 sides, and then for, I think it was $1,200 for 2 sides, and then they'd get a stack of 45s, And that was where a lot of the guys made a living, And my first session I went to was Mel Tillis in Columbia RCA B, which is now the tourist room, And he was doing a duet with Sherry Bryce called "Living and Learning," and he was drunk, and we had somehow gotten somebody to let us in. You just kidding me, yeah. 3 of us, and we're long-haired guys, and Mel's drunk, and he finishes the thing 2 sides, and he throws them on the floor. And at the time, the Beatles had just finished the White Album, and it took them 6 months to do. He goes, "Fucking Beatles, 6 months, 6 hours." And it was, "Yes, sir, Mr. Tillis." We became good friends over the years, Mel and I. It was so interesting to see the growth of country music, and then Farron Young, my hero, one of the greatest, cut Willie's Hello Walls, etc. And he was the one who at the time, and he goes, John Lennon and Yoko Ono had just done the naked photo thing, and he goes, "And there was that naked nip on the goddamn thing," and we're going, okay, well, that's Nashville, yeah. I just adored it because it was so funky. I mean, it was, there was 65 labels, I can't even remember. Everybody had what do you mean label? In the charts, there was 1 through 65 on the country charts. It wasn't top 40. It was 65 records. And it was, you would go to all these AM radio stations, and promote your little record. Jukebox operators, that was big. You went to the jukebox operators because they bought 45 to put on the jukeboxes. 77, I remember we hired a guy out of college. He later became a partner of mine. He would go before the band. He'd go to the record store and the radio stations. Oh, they're coming to town, and that's how you did it, if you were lucky. Of course, we were making $150 a week, each band member. Had a bus that broke down every day. I drove, or maybe we get somebody to drive, But it's why I say it's really. But we were able to have a band, 5 to 7 piece, depending on the year, and later 10 to 12 pieces, because nobody cared, you got to play, you're on a bus, a funky ass bus, but they didn't have the big, these were double clutching. You had to, like with Tillis, everybody in the band had to drive. I mean, that was part of the deal. And
there weren't a lot of major interstates between things sometimes too.
The interstates stopped at the edge of town. And when the first cell phones came in, we got one, of course. You couldn't hold them. They were a bag phone, or else they're in the wall of the bus. And they would work on the east side of town to the west side of town, then they'd fade out to the next town. And the interstate's the same thing. None of them had loops. You go straight through town. And then they started building these loops, I was driving. Occasionally we'd have a driver, but we would always, and that's the only time I took pills was when I had to drive, because you had to, that's safety. That's what I'm saying. What do you mean? You want me to drive without these?
Waylon's book, he called them LA turnarounds.
The LA turnarounds were, I can't remember exactly, but they had Black Mollies, LA turns around. Dex Mills were Christmas trees because they were little capsules with green and white. And of course, Bennies, which were white pills. We used to say, the thing was, you'd throw them against the windshield and catch them in. And of course, me being me, I tried to explain, my poor kids. And I'd say, I would roll joints while driving. You put it on a big wheel. And back then, these were seated joints. I mean, because it wasn't sense of me. I can't believe we didn't die. But we were young and stupid and determined, really, to change the way it was, and it worked.
I think that's one thing that some of the people you talked about, there's an ambition that it takes just to survive all of that, that maybe a person like Towns might not be so ambitious for career-wise or whatever.
Exactly what it is that they were living for the song, I was a performer. I've always wanted to be on stage from the time I could remember. And it was more important for me to be able to get on stage. That was my goal, to play every night. And we did it, And, along the way, I was very, I built studios and produced other folks and did management because I had to, my friends always called me Biz Benson because you take care of business. I said, yeah, man, because that's what I want. I want to be able to do this. I want the best musicians in my band, and that means you got to pay them. And how do we pay them? And that was the thing. I don't love doing business, but I like the results of it. And believe me, the career is like this, if you're lucky. And when we hit the down times, I just would be persistent. I'm going to find my way out of this mess somehow. And Willie was the same way. I mean, I still remember before, I have to put the dates on this because I'm not sure what. Maybe it's late 90s, and Willie's not doing well in terms of, no more hits. He ain't getting the hits. They're not playing them anymore. And what does he do? Probably it's 2000s, I think. hops on fucking Toby Keith's Gravy Train. Does one of the worst songs Willie Nelson's ever done, Beer for My Horses, and gets back on the charts. And then gets back on the charts, and then does, and starts realizing, you got to be with young people or you're nobody anymore. Does stuff with Leanne Womack, great stuff, and all of a sudden he crosses that line, and he's a legend, and he starts making better money. But we were, I did a lot of stuff with Will. Okay, like a lady comes to me and says, I want Willie to play my 80th birthday, and I can't get his agent. Nobody will. And I said, how much money you got? He said, I said, I used to see him at the Broken Spoke back in the 60s. I said, I'll tell you what, give me $100,000 and we'll play the Broken Spoke, I promise. So I go to Willie, I said, hey, you off on next Tuesday? Or, this lady wants to, I said, I'll give you $75,000 and we'll back you up, because we're one of the only bands that he would let, back up without the family band. And I said, sure, man. So I give him $100,000 in cash. The lady gave me 25 for a sleep at the wheel and production, and I did that a number of times with Will. Because a lot of people don't realize, I don't care how much money you're making, you got manager, agent, publicist, fuel, bus driver saying, you ain't making a lot after everything, and cash is king. And as long as he had cash, he was fine. And when the IRS thing hit, it was tough because they took everything. And I still remember one time B. Spears, who lived here, was his bass player, arranged, some honky-tonk out on Nolensville Road or somewhere, I don't know, said, okay, Willie will come in and play with the house band here. He wants $2,500. Just start calling everybody you know. He'll be here at 10. And that's how he made it through the IRS sometimes. Here's $2,500 cash. Now you got cash in your pocket. Wow. Yeah. And
a place out on Nolensville Road?
Well, I'm making up Nolensville,
okay.
But it was something like that. It was out, or maybe it was, it was somewhere out at some honky-tonk,
Can you imagine the guy that just happened to come in after work, have a beer, and there's Willie Nelson playing?
For 45-minute set, yep. Yeah, and that's, like I say, because I remember the IRS thing was tough. And so I'm out there with him, and I said, how you doing, pal? He said, I'm all right. He said, a little embarrassed for my family because it's spread all over the news. He said, but hey, I can walk into any honky-tonk in America and walk out with thousands of dollars. What the fuck? And that's Willie, and that's the way I am, because it's the only way you can be. You got to love what you're doing, and we do. I love getting up and playing. That's all I know. I don't love sometimes traveling, although sometimes I do. Looking out the window of the buses, I've been on that damn thing 54 years, and I still love watching America go by, because it's just fascinating. If you got an imagination, there it is. It's a movie. I'm so fortunate that I was able to figure it out. How do I keep doing this? I met Billy Joe, 73, the famous Terlingua trip. Incredible story. We're all up there, and we have that double-decker bus and everything. And this guy comes on with 3 bags of dope and a soup spoon. Green, white, and red. We're putting on a big concert in Terlingua. You know where that is? It's on the border, Wick Fowler and all these guys have the chili cook-off there, the famous Terlingua chili cook-off. A bunch of old guys went down there to drink beer and make chili. So these guys say, we're going to put on a big concert right down the road from there, and all these, they used to have about a couple thousand people, and they'll all come over. Okay, so this guy, Jim Marlin, goes around to everybody with these bags of Coke and the soup spoon. Waylon, Willie, Billy Joe, Jerry Jeff, Sleep at the Wheel, Delbert and Glenn, the Giesenslaw brothers, Sammy Smith, for this concert. Meanwhile, they hire Nicholas Ray, made Rebel Without a Cause, the inventor of film noir, legendary filmmaker. He's a strung-out drug addict by now. But these guys get them down there with 35 millimeter camera crews. They're going to film this concert. We all get down there. 40 people show up. Now we're all down there for 2 or 3 days. We play, Willie plays, Delbert plays. I don't think Jerry Jeff or Billy Joe ever played except around a campfire. They filmed a bunch of stuff, but never mind. We all pack up and go because the next day is Jerry Jeff's release of Viva Terlingua, which had nothing to do with this. And this was such a butt. We got paid $300, and I think we were the only one got paid. So meanwhile, this caravan goes up to Abbott, Texas, Willie's hometown, for Abbott homecoming. Well, Abbott was not happy that this was happening, and it was a bust, etc. But anyway, that was the whole thing. So I meet Billy Joe, and he goes, we played. And I had an old fiddler with us because our other fiddler had gotten into a fight in Nashville, but the bottom line, so we picked up this old rancher who had played fiddle, and it was great. So we're doing Bob Wills music, and afterwards Billy Joe comes up and he says, I'm really disappointed. And when Billy Joe's disappointed, you don't want to be in the same room. And I went, what? He said, I heard you were just like Bob Wills, and you don't break meter. You know what that means. Yeah. That's why I like Bob Wills, because Billy Joe could never do the same thing. He could never keep meter, so he thought that was cool. Okay, I'm like Bob Wills, you know. From then on, I broke meter. And we became great friends. And he would jump up on stage and do, I'm in the Georgia on a fast train with us. And then I cut Way Down Texas Way. Freddie Fletcher, Willie's nephew, said, you ought to cut, he was playing drums for Billy Joe. You ought to cut Way Down Texas Way. It's a shuffle, you know. So we cut it, and it was a minor hit. We were good friends. And then, of course, it was Billy Joe, so you never knew. And like one day he would just turn on you like a rattlesnake, you know, for no reason or for his reason. You know. But he was brilliant. He was just, he was the best. And
what's your earliest memories of Waylon?
The first record, 1968, is that right? I'm listening to this, because in Philadelphia, which had the radio, you know, there was, you know, and was it called Rock, Salt, and Nails, I think?
Utah Phillips wrote that.
Utah did?
Yeah.
I met him.
Really? In
1969-70 in Philly, yeah, at a concert. But it was something like that, and it was on A&M Records. I remember that. That's when I first heard him. And I was like, wow, this is like country rock, kind of, you know, it was obvious. And then I bought the RCA records starting in 70. The ones Chet did, I still love them, you know. And met him in 73 or 4. A concert with Willie, Waylon, Sammy Smith, us. I'm not sure, I hope I remember going to have breakfast, and he was so nice, and he said, you know, Bob Wills was revolutionary in his time. Oh, this guy knows. Yeah. So we played a lot of shows with the band, with Richie and the original band. The original band was Bobby Harold. He was, you know, it was before the Outlaw thing, really. And Richie became a good friend. Richie Albright was half the reason Waylon, you know, had that sound, like we used to call him Richie Allfoot. Doom, doom, doom. And I finally realized, a few years ago, because I knew he was good friends with Cash and they were roommates, etc. All of a sudden I realized he was trying to strip his sound down like Cash had done. It was him on that guitar with the phase shifter, bass, drums, and Mooney. And whether or not it was, whether or not he thought it out or not, it doesn't matter. It was obvious. It was, you know, strip it down to Waylon and a beat. And that's what Cash had done.
Is that the earliest that you could think of, that beat? Because it seems like there's the Waylon beat that we think of, but where does that come from?
That was Richie Albright. And definitely, period. That was it, because we would, and then Mooney, just brilliant. It was so cool. And he just would let him play, so we were huge. And again, back then, because Willie was our pal, we were all pals. But we went, oh, Waylon's going to be the hit. The chicks go crazy. And here's Willie. He's too weird, too cool, way too esoteric. And it was so amazing to watch the ascension of Willie Nelson to one-word superstar, one-name superstar. It was hippies and rednecks, combining. Everybody had long hair because it was fine for rednecks to have long hair by 72, 3, 4. And everybody's either drinking, getting high, or doing psychedelics, depending on their preferences. But getting along, in a very short period of time. But it was that one time when I saw music absolutely conquer hate. Yeah. So we came to Austin. We moved to Austin. We played there in February of '73 when our first record came out. And
was that at the Armadillo?
At the Armadillo, opening for Commander Cody.
What do you remember about your thoughts of that night?
We're in heaven. This is fucking amazing. Pot's $10 an ounce, and it's really great. there's hippie girls loving our country music, and then we could also, and see, we were the only long hair hippie band that could play the redneck dance joints. Because we had cut our hair and were wearing country western outfits, and we would play Johnny Bush, Ray Price, Bob Wills, Willie, and we were playing the redneck dance halls as well as the rock joints. So it was heaven for us, And we moved down there as fast as we could. Rented a house at the end of '73. Got back there in February of '74. But we had been playing all through '73, and it was just amazing. It was, like I said, one time I did a panel with the high tech thing that hit Austin big time by 1990 or 89, whatever it was. And they asked me to be on a panel with Michael Dell Computers, Steve Hicks, who wound up being, he's the guy who created Clear Channel. Another girl, and Matthew Knowles, that's Beyonce's father. So, okay, Ray, so why did all these musicians come to Austin, Ray? I said, well, there were a lot of gigs. Rent was cheap and pot was cheap. Michael Dell goes. Anyway.
Facts are stubborn things.
Facts are stubborn things, but that was it. It was just heaven. I mean, rent was $300 a month. There was gigs all over. $300 for a nice place. I mean, $100 for a shitty place. It really was incredible. And then you had all this history, of the great old blues guys, Lightning Hopkins, Mance Lipskin. They were all from the area, T-Bone Walker from, they'd all left because, again, Texas was a very racist place, A lot of these folks left, went to California or elsewhere, Chicago, whatever, just to get out of there. But they were Texans, Guitar, Johnny Guitar Watson, he was from Houston, but they were in L.A., that's where you go if you wanted to be treated right. But it was all there, and it was wonderful. And then we come, and they were like, oh my gosh, there's this weird young band, and they're playing Bob Wills music. And they were amazed, and it was obvious, that something was going on. We didn't consider ourselves a Bob Wills. We played hillbilly music, boogie woogie, western swing, and wrote our own songs or covered other people's songs. We did it all. We just felt roots. We felt we were roots American music. That's we did Cajun music, we did honky tonk music, Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, etc. But the Bob Wills thing was like a flashpoint. People were like, because there were no western swing bands anymore. They were gone. I asked Johnny Gimble, where can we go see? He was still in Nashville doing sessions. Where can we go see a Western Swing band? Well, go see the River Road Boys. Great Western Swing players. We went to see them. They were playing the radio because that's what they were getting paid to do. It's a country Western dance hall. But Troy Passmore, this was one of the great guitar players, the two fiddle players, Bob White, and they were amazed. You guys are doing what? Take Me Back Tulsa was our first single, I think, or Driving Nails My Coffin, maybe. But anyway, yeah, it was wonderful. Like Floyd Tillman come out to see us, Al Dexter, Jerry Irby. These were all, writers from the 40s and 50s, and they couldn't believe that there was this band called Asleep at the Wheel. And we played Liberty Hall, was a famous place in Houston. Springsteen, us, everybody played coming up, We played there. But that's what we were kind of like. I had a friend of mine was my partner, business partner, Peter Schwartz. He was played bass for Steve Riley, but his father was Tracy Schwartz in the New Lost City Ramblers. But anyway, they were musicologists. They were, Mike Seeger, him, and Tracy Schwartz, and the other guy, Cohen. And they had rediscovering these roots American folk artists, or country artists, like I say. And that's what we kind of consider ourselves, but we also were songwriters, so we wrote our songs, but we wrote in those styles, And that's what it was all about. It was so much fun and so idealistic. And also we had this huge band and didn't make any money. And then we had a hit record. And so we just toured and didn't make any money.
In this early, say 72, 74 period or whatever, when you first met Waylon, what did he think of what y'all were doing?
He loved us because, and we were friends, and he understood that the musicianship was A+. This was the Sleep at the Wheel has always had the best musicianship there could be. When we went out to California, Joe Kerr and the Commander Cody guys used to say, the difference between us and them is after the gig, they go home and practice, because we were, and we had backed up, we went out there before we had a record deal, we backed up Stoney Edwards. We were Stoney Edwards' band. He was a black country singer on Capitol Records, had Hank and Lefty Raised My Country Soul, and She's My Rock, and I Ain't Gonna Throw Her Away Before George, and it's an incredible story, but we were the poor folks, they called us. We went out on the road with Stoney, and we'd show up at these package shows, and who's on it but Freddie Hart. Freddie Hart's Easy's Lovin' is number one. We're the Heartbeats. For a week, we were the Heartbeats, or 10 days, backing up Freddie Hart, then Connie Smith, and we're backing up Connie Smith, then Dave Dudley, we're backing up Dave Dudley. That's where we made our bones, We backed up the Country Cavaliers. I don't remember these, they were, early Nashville. Anyway, backed up Dickie Lee, LaWanda Lindsay. You'd show up in these package shows, and if you were a band, they said, you're backing them up, So we made our bones, and it was like, and we're playing there, and Willie shows up for a gig in Greenville, North Carolina or South Carolina, I can't remember which one. The guy hadn't paid us for 2 days, and I was 20 years old, I said, I'm going to pay you tomorrow, boys. Oh, okay, Mr. Woody. So Willie shows up on our third shows, and he comes into our mobile home. We had a Winnebago with Stoney. Y'all been paid? I said, no, but he's going to pay us tomorrow. He said, okay, hold on. So me and B and Paul are hanging. I'll be right back. Willie goes off to get paid. 15 minutes later, he comes back and goes, come on, we're going back to Nashville. He ain't got the money. I said, well, he's going to pay us tomorrow. He never paid us. Never paid us. Didn't pay. And then he split out on Freddie, and this is a great story. So many years, the next year I'm at the DJs Convention, which was a big thing here in Nashville. Before Fantra, it was called the DJs Convention, and they had all the DJs and had the big shows and everything. And I'm walking, and Joe managed Freddie Hart. They used to manage McFadden, Joe McFadden, and his dad had managed Buck. And I see Joe. I said, oh, Joe, remember that guy who screwed us? He said, oh, you want to hear something? I'm walking down the street. I see him. This is Joe talking. I see the guy. He owes Freddie $5,000 for the 4 shows. Somehow he'd only gotten half, whatever. he grabs the guy, takes him to a phone booth, shoves him in the phone booth, and says, "You ain't getting out till I get my $5,000, man." But I don't have it. You make a phone call, asshole, you know. It was like, he said he finally got the money. I said, God, I wish you'd gotten ours. But those were the times, and that's how we made our bones, really. And the next thing we know, so we're playing in the Bay Area, and we're finished with all that, and Van Morrison hears us and books us on this. We were playing to Long Branch every Tuesday night, sleep at the wheel, $1 and you get a free draft beer. And here's this country band, so he comes down, he says, I want you to open a show for me, this little club. So he comes down just so he can sing country songs. And he mentions us and Clover. Clover was John McPhee, Huey Lewis, John Chimbote, and they were our pals. And they asked him, who's some of the bands you like? He said, I like Asleep at the Wheel and Clover. They're two great bands. All of a sudden we get a record deal on, Dan Burgoyne signs us to United Artists. And we're on our way, And that's how it went down. So when the album comes out, Willie has no idea that this band that backed up Freddie Hart and Stoney Edwards is Asleep at the Wheel, because we had to be called the Poor Folks, which was Stoney Edwards. Poor Folks Stick Together was his hit. So the record comes out in February of '73, and Willie hears about this band, Asleep at the Wheel, playing Bob Wills music, and he comes down to this club we're playing with Richie Albright, because Waylon and them had just played somewhere. And we smoke a joint, become good friends, and that was the beginning of our relationship, And he's been... I'm going to write a book when I get a minute called 6 Degrees of Willie, because the meeting Willie has been everything in my life, personally, professionally, and I got to get it down because it's a pretty interesting story. But after that, like I say, Doug was there, and it was just great, Austin, 1973, 4, 5, 6, was a post-hippie cultural paradise. There were writers, filmmakers. A guy named Eagle Pinnell did these incredible... He was the first underground filmmaker there. Did the whole shooting match and Last Night at the Alamo. If you ever get a chance, they were Sonny Carl Davis and Lou Perry were the stars, and Lou got murdered tragically about 15 years ago. But they were Austin actors, and Eagle was the first filmmaker. Toby Hooper was part of he's the guy who did Poltergeist and thing. And it was just, nascent kind of film community. Doug Holloway was another one. We did a film called, I did the first soundtrack called Fast Money, with those two guys and Samuel L. Red. And then I did the soundtrack with the Thunderbirds, the original Thunderbirds, us, and whoever was around. But there was all these creative people. And I likened it to Paris in the 30s when all those expats went over there, and Hemingway and all those people, because there were writers, filmmakers, all doing their thing, as we used to say, all. And when Rick Linklater came years later and coined the word slackers, that's who we were. We were the originals.
Why did that happen with Austin and not anywhere else? It was like the first place Dylan played and didn't get booed with the band. Why in Austin, you think?
Because Austin has always been a little bubble of intellectual creativity, going back to the 20s, 30s, Bedachek, Dobie, and John Henry Falk, who that was? John Henry Falk was a big radio show, and he was blacklisted. He was from South Austin, and he was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, the early 50s. Alan Lomax, the Lomax, they were from Austin, Leadbelly, etc. There was always a core of intellectualism, and yet folk arts kind of, sensibility, and that has always been there. I never saw Marley live, but Peter Tosh, we actually did a gig with him, and when the NFL Players Union was formed, they decided to have a party, and they said, well, we need a band for the white guys and a band for the black guys. So they hired Peter Tosh and Asleep at the Wheel. We went on first, and all the white guys, I guess, I don't know, man, that's all I can say. And then Peter Tosh went on, I was like, whoa. But in terms of reggae music, no, I first went to Jamaica in 1980 and went down and saw Toots and the Maytals at a club and was just blown away. And I was familiar with the recorded music, but then got to meet Mikey Chinna Smith and a lot of the players. And just so anyway, so I loved reggae music, mostly through Toots. And of course I saw, The Harder They Come. I loved it. The movie was phenomenal. And I had a bunch of friends. Richard Feldman was a Tulsa guy, and he did some of the first White Boy with Leon Russell. He worked with Leon Dent. He would go to Tough Gong and work. And so I knew all about it. And that was about it. Of course, and you go back to, I started in Washington, D.C. When we lived in West Virginia, we played. And these two friends of mine, Bill and Taffy, wrote Take Me Home Country Roads with Denver. Because we lived in West Virginia, and we were playing at this little bar with him in 1970. Hey, you're from West Virginia. We just wrote this song, Take Me Home Country Roads. Oh, cool, yeah. And when they say Mountain Mama, see, our next door neighbor was a 300-pounder with no teeth named Stella. When they would say Mountain Mama, I'm going, okay. Because we lived back in the hills in West Virginia. And then I heard Toots and the Maytals cut it. It was a huge hit. It was West Jamaica, So anyway, fast forward to 2000 and something, Richard calls me up and says, hey, I'm doing a Toots record. Can you get Willie to sing with him? I said, yeah. What song should we do? I said, Still Is Still Moving. So we did, I co-produced with Richard, Still Is Still Moving with Toots and Willie. But that's my extent of knowing him. But I'm singing, and this guy comes up to me 2 years ago, two and a half years ago, and says, hey, I produce reggae records. I'm named Dr. Dread. I'm a white boy from California, a nice Jewish white boy from California. But he had Ross Records, and he had sold a record label, and he said, could you do a thing where you mashed up Western swing and country music? I said, oh, sure. It's just, because that was, I would go around in Jamaica when I would go visit in Montego Bay, and the houseboy who worked for us, they would go back and they were playing Dolly Parton, and the Louvin Brothers. I said, because they got the Opry through the skip too, a lot of some. So anyway, I went, yeah, I can do that. And so Tony Garnier, who's Dylan's bass player, we talked about him earlier, and me went down because he said, I got Sly Dunbar. I went, I'm there. He's the greatest drummer. He played all the Peter Tosh, harder, stuff with the Stones and Infidels and etc. So we went down. He put together a band of guys all my age. They were all in their 70s, and we cut some ska stuff, some reggae stuff, and then we took Route 66 always on the road again. Boogie Back to Texas, Bubbles in My Beer, Happy Trails, and just cut them. What are you going to do?
It's got to feel good to just be able to do whatever the hell you want for whatever reasons and have fun with it, musically.
Yeah, I'm going to, I got, my ears are too big to be commercial, I'm a singer and a guitar player. I know I can do that. And this is just a great Jamaican rhythm section, basically. And Tony playing upright bass, not electric, which is your normal. So we did really old ska stuff, like a Theo Beckford song from the early 60s, Easy Snappin', and then we did Easy Skankin', which was a Marley tune. And then we did Put It On, which is an early Wailers tune, which is a prayer, And it really worked. The mashup worked really well. And Willie played guitar on the road again. He loved it. You know, Warren Haynes played well. Then the producer had me do Highway 66, 61. I mean the Dylan song. And I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know it didn't fit in, but it's such a great song that I just said, all right, I'll try it. But I talked it because I couldn't sing it. You know, God said to Abraham, kill me a son. God said, Abe, you must be putting me on. God said, Abe said, what? And I enjoyed doing it. And Warren played his ass off. Warren really saved the song, I think. But I love it. I am proud of it. I'm so glad that I got to do it. And whatever happens, happens, you know. Sister Irie just played it on her radio, man. Sister Irie.
I do think it's beautiful to just do things because you want to do them and it'll be fun. And what happens with it happens with it. But the most important thing is to, you know,
to do it and do it well. That's my deal. I'm not going to do it half-assed. So no, you got to get the best guys. That's my term, you know.
Well, if you're going into a new project to make a record, maybe somebody can learn something from this. Like, where's your head at? What are you thinking? Like, I'm going to make a new record. What are the first things you're thinking of?
As a producer or as a participant?
We'll say as the artist.
As the artist, I know what I want to do. Hey, what's the material? It's all about materials. Okay, what's the material? That's the first thing. What are we going to do? Then who's going to fit the material? And then put who are the players? And try to get the best players for that kind of stuff. You know, and being as I produce myself or co-produce myself, depending on the situation, then I have a little more control over that. But in terms of aesthetics, it's always, what do I want it to sound like? You know, do I want it to? And there's always usually it harkens back to something.
You're defining a universe.
Yeah.
And you're gonna like shoot for that universe.
Yeah, and it's like making soup. You know, what are you gonna put in the pot? You know, who does it, and what does it take to make this bunch of people? Is it freedom? In this one, it was like, okay, these are pros. 2 days, 12 cuts. Rhythm cut, that go back and do the vocals because, just one for the other, Some things take longer, The best things, but again, I always cut live and then fix. So we're not bass drums and fill it in, but there's got to be a vibe to it. And that's the hardest thing, is to figure that out. Do we want the lights up or the lights down? You never know. What kind of group is in there? Who are these people? Do you want them to be stoned or do you want them straight? Some people you don't want stoned when they record. Some people are great when they're stoned. So it's all making everybody comfortable.